Hey, Scott Kennedy, ready to talk some NFL draft as we do often on this channel. And today we're going to go to Alabama. The Crimson Tide might make up about half of the first round and 3/4 of the entire draft. So I'm bringing in my good friend Christopher Walsh. And if you don't know Christopher Walsh's work, he runs BamaCentral.com on SI's Fan Nation. So you can go there. Christopher Walsh and I go back a few years. And if there is a more professional person in this business, I haven't found him. I consider him a close friend of mine at this point in this business, and I'm just thoroughly impressed with his work. I respect the hell out of him, and I'm glad to have him on the show. I'm honored to have him, and I'm going to join him in. And this is Christopher Walsh, BamaCentral author, publisher, writer, award winner. I mean, it's just the list goes on. What are you working on these days, and how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, thanks. Wow, what an intro. It's good to see you, though. And I'm not just saying that because it's good to see anyone at this point, but it's great to see you. And we've got spring football going on. We've got like one more, maybe 2 more weeks of just absolute craziness here with Alabama Crimson Tide. And that doesn't even really include the draft because baseball's got a huge series with Auburn this week. Softball has got a showdown with Florida. Alabama's A-Day game is this week. The women's gymnastics team is in the national championships, and that's this weekend. And it's just kind of one of those weeks where you're just kind of going, So it's.
I do that anyway, so don't feel bad. But no, I as an administrator who got into building out networks and websites and overseeing all this stuff for the last several years, I was always floored with the amount of content that Christopher Walsh put out on his own, and then he started hiring a team of people that were putting out. So he's doing 10 to 12 stories at least of Alabama-centered content every day, and I think it's absolutely amazing. And today I want to talk some NFL draft, if you don't mind getting into that. So
not at all.
No, right now, and for me, I don't necessarily think he's the best Alabama player in this draft, but without a doubt, he is the most intriguing player in this draft, and that's quarterback Mac Jones. Now, I went and saw Mac Jones at the Senior Bowl, and obviously we watched him a lot during the year, and I thought, man, this is a guy that someone might sneak into the end of the first round. He might be in the 20s if the Falcons are looking for their quarterback of the future, and they can trade out of that 4 spot. Maybe they can get him at 18 or 20.
Yeah.
Well, now Kyle Shanahan not only is thinking about taking him at 3, but he traded 3 first-round picks to do it, and then some. So, is there a chance? And do you think this is a possibility? Are you hearing anything down there that makes you think that this is legit?
Yeah. There's a lot of scuttle. There's a lot of talk about the 49ers think they found their guy. And it's Mac Jones. The thing about Mac that I've been watching him for a long time now, obviously.
That's why you're here.
The thing about him that is just so impressive to me is his consistency. Mm-hmm. And I mean, granted, you'll see him every once in a while make a mistake, and then he quickly recovers and he moves on. And I hate comparisons to NFL quarterbacks, but in terms of kind of style in that way, yeah, he reminds me a little bit of Tom Brady because he has that very regimented approach, puts in a ton of work. He's very competitive. I mean, he used to be a tennis player, so if tennis players. And, the guys who just hate to lose, I mean, that's exactly what this guy is, and he's a quarterback. So he doesn't have necessarily that wow factor like you watch some of these other guys and you just go, holy cow, that's amazing. But he makes all the throws, and he makes all the reads, and he's consistent, and he led the nation in passer efficiency, in the passer rating this past year. So am I a little surprised that he might go up at number 3? Yeah, a little bit, just because I think, when push comes to shove, these teams usually fall in love with the wow guy, the flash guys, kind of thing. And especially when you start getting the owners involved and so forth. But I think he has the potential to be a very good pro quarterback and the kind of guy that could be doing it for a number of years.
Okay, so it's definitely. I mean, I don't think we had Grant Cohn on. One of your colleagues covers 49ers with Fan Nation Sports Illustrated, and he says this. I'm not going against what Adam Schefter says. I think this is who they're going to take. and Eric, welcome, Mr. Anderson, welcome. He says need to draft a quarterback. Matt Ryan has passed his glory. Whether or not I agree with that, I think the Falcons need to take a quarterback because he's 36 years old. We can't count on these guys to keep doing Drew Brees and Tom Brady's and playing. They're 41, 42, 43 years old. But when I watched Mac Jones, the thing that impressed me was his ability to stand tall against a rush. People say, it's Alabama. They're better than everybody. They got better positions than everybody, but that doesn't mean you're not going to get hit. And some of the things I saw him do in the face of the blitz was really impressive. And to me, that's what got me. And then you just ask, does he have enough arm? Because Danny Werfel is one of the best college quarterbacks I ever saw. He didn't have an NFL arm, and yes, he does. He has enough size. He has enough everything to go in that spot. So for the record, because I'm going to end up quoting you on this one, do you think it'd be a mistake for the 49ers to take Mac Jones at 3, or do you think he can help them take the next step past where Jimmy Garoppolo is in the next year or two and be a Super Bowl type of quarterback?
No, I don't think it would be a mistake at all. I don't think it would be a mistake for any of these teams to take him. I think he's got that kind of potential. And I'll kind of tell you, I'll give you a real quick story. During the offseason, so many people were talking about, the quarterbacks in the SEC for the 2020 season. And it was, it seemed like every single team had one. And I kept bringing up the question of who's going to be the all SEC first team selection preseason in the polls and so forth. And I was the only one who was saying, I think it's going to be Mac Jones. And the moment that it turned for me was there was there was a workout sometime in the spring. And I heard about it from a couple of guys where Mac really stuck his head in somewhere and he got walloped. And he got up and he had a bloody nose. And he basically just kind of just shook it off and he went right back in and didn't even blink an eye kind of thing. And those are the kind of moments when quarterbacks win over teams. And right then and there, I was like, this kid's got this team, kind of thing. And look what happened. And he looked good at the end of last season too. And so many people weren't even paying attention to that as well. Like the Michigan game, the Auburn game, the Auburn game, he had a couple of big mistakes, but other than that, he looked really, really good. And so he's going to have to do it again wherever he goes. He's going to have to win over the team, win over the teammates, and so forth. But this is he's got that stubbornness, if you will, that you need to really succeed as a quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, when I was talk to recruits or talk to kids in a group, I said, don't ever let anybody tell you no. Just don't ever let them tell you no, because no matter where you're ranked or what anybody thinks about you, there are guys that come out of nowhere in sports every year. And if you keep working, if you're good enough, you'll get there eventually. And and Mac Jones has proven that, because nobody sticks it out anymore. Because I'm going to use 2 examples for the same guy that you're talking about, because I had the same feeling about Justin Fields when Skalski about cut him in half in the semifinal game, and then he gets up with bruised ribs and throws a 65-yard touchdown pass. Yeah. The pass itself went that far. It was more like a 58-yard, but whatever. He's the fact that he was able to do that when, for all intents and purposes, I thought he was done, won me over. So I've been saying Justin Fields for the Falcons at 4 if he's there since that moment. I'm like, that's your guy. That's the guy they need to get. So I completely understand that. But then the other part of that is Justin Fields didn't stick it out at Georgia, didn't keep going, whereas Mac Jones did. And there's something to be said for that, about that stubbornness that you speak about. So I appreciate your insight there. And I know the Broncos fans and the 49ers fans will be interested, because we're going to talk a lot of quarterbacks on Broncos for Breakfast tomorrow. So make sure you're checking us out on Twitter. Now let's move on. Patrick Surtain.
Okay.
Right here, 6'2", 208 pounds. That was about Mark Barron's size, I think, when he showed up. And I think I had him as an outside linebacker coming out of Mobile when he was in high school. Just a physical specimen. He could be the first corner taken off the board. We're talking scheme fits. I've watched him and Caleb Farley a little bit. Do you think Surtain is one of those guys who could fit in any type of scheme? How did you see him progress through his time at Alabama, where he ends up winning SEC Defensive Player of the Year? That's really impressive as a defensive back.
Yeah, and he could be the first defensive player, period, taken in the draft, which is pretty remarkable. I'm old enough to remember his dad when he played, and his dad was a phenomenal player. And I actually wrote an article a little while ago saying that this guy's actually a better prospect going into the NFL than his dad was, which it took a lot for me to write that because his dad was that good. But the thing about Surtain, he reminds me a lot of Marlon Humphrey, who was just here, a couple years ago. Steady, consistent, knows the defense, makes the reads. He's tall, he's got long arms. He's exactly the kind of cornerback that every team is going for. And I'm kind of glad that we've gone away from the term shutdown cornerback or, someone's on an island kind of thing, because those guys they don't happen. It's like maybe in a generation we find someone that good. This kid's really good. He's got to be an instant starter wherever he goes. He's going to be a rock. He can match up against anyone. He's got good speed. He is the kind of guy that you stick out there and then you don't worry about him. But he's not going to shut down elite cornerbacks, like Deion Sanders did, but he's going to make a lot more tackles than Deion Sanders did.
Yeah. I remember Patrick Peterson, who's one of the best corners there is, calling out Julio Jones, and Julio Jones dropped about 300 on him that day. It's just the rules favor the offense way too much to have a shutdown guy anymore.
Yeah.
You mentioned Marlon Humphrey, and then you also came around to something that I was going to say about Surtain. I think Surtain's more physical than Humphrey wasn't it? Don't you think?
He might be a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. It's not, if he is, it's not by a wide margin. He tackles well. He plays physically. He plays close to the line. He can jam. He can do everything. The great thing is about having a dad like that. He can, he's got an extra coach basically, helping him out every single day. But
I think there's something to be said that from the preparation factor. You see it so much in Major League Baseball too, where sons of Major League Baseball players play Major League Baseball, and so much of that game is mental that you just know that they're never going to be wowed, or they're not going to be afraid of the moment when they've grown up in that environment. I think there's something to be said for that.
I'm actually going to write something in the near future. I haven't done it yet, so I'm going to give it away here. It wasn't that long ago that we were hearing from a lot of people is like, oh, Alabama guys are just too beat up when they come out kind of thing. And I was talking to someone who's really in the know, and I asked him about it, and he told me that it's now becoming the opposite. And he said, we need more guys in the NFL like the guys from Alabama and say like Ohio State, guys who can, they're surrounded by it. They know what they're doing. There's no big change in terms of the culture, and they know how to prepare and how to be a teammate in a locker room from day one. Yeah.
Who's the linebacker from Troop County that I'm thinking of? Reuben Foster.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're talking about beat up, Reuben was beat up before he got to Alabama. Reuben is a crazy man, and on the football field, and I think he concussed himself half a dozen times before he even got to Alabama.
I love the running back play, but I don't know how many times it was like, dude, your head, don't drop your head on the tackle. You know?
So and the running backs, they're sharing the load a lot of the time. So I don't see that. And you talk about playing early. If you get a chance, you'll see time. There's a lot of rotation there. Now, let's move on and let's go to the other side of the ball, because there's a couple guys that are going to go in the top 12 and in the draft, I think. And let's start with Jaylen Waddle. Okay. Then we'll move on to Devonta Smith. Let's make the case. Make the case of why would I take Jaylen Waddle over Devonta Smith and maybe even over Jamar Chase of LSU. I don't know that you would there, but make the case for Jaylen Waddle first.
Kind of reminds me of last year when it was Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs III, and Ruggs went first because the Raiders, that's what the Raiders do. They love the speed guy.
Mm-hmm.
So If you are a team that are, I mean, in terms of playmakers, you know, the biggest wow factor that you have is that if that's what you got to have on your team, Waddle's your guy. I mean, he's the best punt returner in the league. You get him the ball in open space, he can do things that no one else can do. Probably the only knock, if you will, is that, I mean, he was a starter for 5 or 6 games before he got hurt. I mean, and that's it. I mean, he's really dynamic. He's so much fun to watch. He's gonna, wherever he goes, he's gonna have a great career.
Okay, next, Devonta Smith. Make the case for Devonta Smith. Why would I take Devonta Smith over Jaylen Waddle if I'm looking at those two? Because they're neck and neck again, like you're saying. So
yeah,
why would I take Devonta Smith over Jaylen Waddle?
Best overall wide receiver in the draft. I don't think there's any doubt about it. The only thing that people are, you know, they get hung up upon is they look at him and they say he's only 170 pounds. Well, he played in a 10-game SEC schedule this year, had no problems physically. I mean, yeah, he's going to take some hard hits. Actually, he doesn't take that many hard hits because he's almost impossible to catch, you know? So it's just really dynamic player, does everything well, playmaker, running routes. And it's so funny that, you know, but watching him for years and so many people kept underrating him. You know, this is the kid as a true freshman caught the winning touchdown against Georgia in the national championship game. And he just kept going. And he didn't want to be known for that, you know? And he won the Heisman Trophy. And that shows you, you know, how determined he is.
So Alan chimes in on YouTube. Appreciate it. It says, Jamar is a clear no-brainer. He's better. Waddle is small. Frankly, they're both a little small. Neither one of them are huge. So I'm going to put you on the spot here and say, okay, it's your pick. You're sitting there at 9 or 10. You want a receiver. And there's Waddle and there's Devonta Smith on the board. Who are you taking? Yeah,
you know, honestly, it depends on how.
No, depends. Nope. We're not talking about anybody else. This is
because it depends on the team that I have. It depends what I have on the roster. Am I going? Do I need a big guy on the outside? Do I need the guy out of the slot? Do I need the guy who's going to do everything? That to me is going to decide who it should be. And you know the way these teams work. They each one they fall in love with someone. And it's like, that's the guy that we got to have. So I love all three. And it kind of bothers me a little bit at this point that I think Smith is still kind of being, I don't want to say overlooked. I mean, he did everything. And Chase is an amazing, they're all great, you know. You can't go wrong.
For me, I have a clear bias towards bigger receivers.
Okay.
You know, so for me, if it's close, I'm going with the bigger guy. That's why we put Julio in that class of 2008, I think it was. That was so amazing. Julio Jones was number 1. AJ Green was number 2, and the reason why was because Julio was about 20 pounds bigger than him at the time. And Bill, I mean, it was Julio. I mean, we know what he looks like. The guy was they call him the finished product. He looked like the finished product coming out of high school, and then he went on to prove it. And then they get to the draft. And the question is like, okay, AJ might be a little more fluid, a little bit more dynamic, and Julio's bigger. And then AJ comes in and weighs in at 220, and Julio goes and runs a 4.38. You're like, all right.
On a broken foot, too.
Yeah, I don't know what to do now. I'm going to just stick with Julio.
Yeah.
So, I'm with you on that. Now, I think a guy, speaking of overlooked, I want to go down to Christian Barmore. I've got a lot of Falcons fans that watch this show, and if there was a guy that was a defensive end in that number 4 spot, the pick is clear. They need somebody to put pressure on the quarterback more than anything. They've got a good defensive tackle there in Grady Jarrett, but a defensive line is a premium position, and there just doesn't seem to be a guy that anybody's really talking about in the top 10 that's worthy of that pick. But Christian Barmore, he looks really good to me. When I'm watching his film, I look at his measurables. You know, why isn't anybody talking about him more as being a pick in the upper top 15s instead of the back half of the first round?
I think just a lot of it just has to do with, I mean, he came on strong as the season progressed, but he doesn't have that full body of work resume, if you will, where you can sit there and say, oh, look, he was consistent, you know, from day day one to the day that they won the national championship. Mm-hmm. He's a dynamic player, and at times he's almost unblockable, which I think that's the reason why he's going to be a first round pick. It's just because it's when he's on, he's that good. But it's not the greatest year, like you said, for defensive linemen, defensive tackles in particular. I think he's going to go first round, but it's going to be low probably. He's going to end up on a team like Tampa Bay, and where you sit there and go, great, the rich just got richer kind of thing. But it's he doesn't have the full body of work is what it boils down to. And he got hurt right before the season started, so he got off to a slow start. But when push came to shove, he was a huge contributor down the stretch.
Okay, so my question on that for the production is was it ever a motor issue with him, or was it injury, or why wasn't he more involved and have a bigger impact, or did he grow into that? Did he grow into that role as the games got more and more important as Alabama went towards another national championship?
I don't think it's his motor because it's when he was starting off, he kept getting these penalties for roughing the quarterback because he'd bring his arm down on top of the quarterback's head.
A few of those are okay. We don't mind a few of those, but
it kept happening though. But I think part of it was they needed him to buy in more into the team concept of you have this assignment, you have to do it. And when you don't, the running back, there's a huge hole for him kind of thing. They had to get him more in terms of having that motor, but in the context of what they needed him to do. And that took some time.
Okay. That makes sense. Overlooked a little bit. I even hate to say overlooked, but running backs are just overlooked these days. Najee Harris, coming out of high school, I think I was either just leaving California or was my last year there. And I think he was a top 2 or 3 guy in the country, regardless of position, coming out of high school. And I don't think that was necessarily a bad evaluation for him by the time he got done with the impact that running backs have on the college level versus the NFL level. I think he's being a little disrespected saying end of the first, beginning of the second round, possibly. What can't Najee Harris do? I mean, you watched him day in, day out, and I'm watching, most of the big games, and he's having the impact you expect.
Yeah, he can do everything. I mean, he's great at running with the ball. Obviously, this year in particular, he was great between the tackles, scores touchdowns, he catches the ball. His blocking got a lot better, obviously, at Alabama. He picks up blitzes. He does do everything. For the most part, he was actually up for the Witten Man of the Year award, and he was Alabama's Community Service Award winner for the SEC. He does a lot of things that a lot of people don't know about. He is Alabama's all-time leading rusher, and he is not overly beat up, which is incredible to me. And the guy can leap over defenders. Yeah. I mean, nice little bonus. He's dynamic. He can do everything. He's gonna make a team better the second he gets there. It's just a lot of teams don't want to take running backs is basically what it boils down to. I think he's going to go first round because someone's going to be sitting there at the bottom going, you know what, we were a playoff team last year. If we had this running back, maybe we could go to the Super Bowl.
Well, and he's one of those guys, Chris, that we talk about as with the Atlanta Falcons, because I think the Falcons have to trade out of that spot. I really do. And if they
out of the 4 spot?
Out of the 4 spot.
Yeah, I agree.
And if they can package, a couple of second rounders together to get back into the first, one of the guys you're looking at there is, at the back end of the first is Najee Harris. And I see a lot of people saying that just see the talent and don't really know the draft that well. Because there's a lot of casual fans that come in and say, oh, they need to draft Najee Harris with 4. I'm like, they're not taking him at 4. Stop saying that. But I would be thrilled to have Najee Harris in the Atlanta Falcons backfield for the next 10 years. And I didn't know he was Alabama's all-time leading rusher. I didn't know that. That's really impressive when you consider the list of names that you can rattle off, especially in the last 10 years. I always, having gone to Auburn and living in Georgia, that was always a Georgia-Auburn battle. Who's running back you? And the resumes are really good. But now Alabama, in the last 10 years, Alabama is, for the last 10 years, it's not really close for the last decade. So that's really impressive. And Bernardo, thanks for coming in on YouTube. He asks, who do you guys think the Giants would draft, Waddle or Smith? I keep thinking that Joe Judge would take Devonta, a captain, because of his connections with the Bama staff. And Bernardo, we talked about this a little bit as far as where it might fit. And honestly, I don't know. I listened to Chris talk about both of them, and knowing what with the Giants, that they're similar type of players. I don't know who they would take between the two of them. I'd feel a little safer taking the guy who's just a little bit bigger. That's just, again, we all have biases. You have to know them and compensate for them so they don't, skew your judgment negatively. But I'm biased towards a bigger guy. I really am. And unless there's any injuries since there. But, and Alan James popped in on YouTube. He says, Jamar Chase is a clear no-brainer. He's better. Yeah, when I was talking about this earlier, I had Jaylen in my head, not Jamar. And I'd go Jamar Chase. I'd go with the bigger guy there without a doubt.
Sounds like Joe Burrow's really lobbying to get him with the Bengals.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. There's a connection there, and a feel-good factor, for lack of a better word. A comfort level when you know somebody, especially going from Alabama, and actually Cincinnati is not that much different from the South, believe it or not. I was born in Ohio, and it's
right
very
across the river from Kentucky. Yeah,
there's it's a very similar atmosphere in Cincinnati, and Atlanta's not that big a difference in the South as far as it's more middle class, down the middle of the country types.
Skyline chili,
as opposed to going to like LA or New York, something like that would be very different. Or even Miami. Moving on one more time, and there's a couple in here that you're talking a little bit about. Landon Dickerson could be Alabama's first offensive lineman off the board. Interior line. Tell us a little bit about what you saw to him daily. About his growth and where he finished at Alabama.
This guy transfers in from Florida State. He had ankle and knee injury issues. It started his career as a tackle. Alabama puts him at center. So you got this huge guy at center. But the thing was, he just became really the leader of the offensive line. When he won the Remington Award, they were doing it virtually on ESPN. He called in everyone on the offense to come stand with him on stage, which is something that we'll never see again, because we're never going to do these things virtually, anymore. But that's Landon Dickerson to a T. And he's got a wicked sense of humor. If you want a good laugh, find one of the stories about he put a piece of wood on front of his truck as a bumper. and of course he was like, putting a chain to it, and he was, pushing around and so forth. But He suffered an ACL injury in the SEC championship game against Florida. And if he doesn't go in the first round, that's the only reason why. It's the durability question, because all the intangibles are, in the words of somebody I was talking to about him, they're off the charts in terms of leadership, physical play, knowing the offense, being that guy that you can rally around. He is absolutely terrific. My favorite moment, one of my favorite moments with him was after Mac Jones did his pro day, and Landon Dickerson was out there snapping the ball for him. He just had ACL surgery a couple months ago, and Mac gets done. He's doing a TV interview, and Landon decides he wants to crack him up, so he starts doing cartwheels in the background, and they're good ones too. Not like one or two. Like he keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. It's just like, holy cow. And the other thing, and I was writing about this today, Jim Moore Jr. Reminded me of this. The national championship game, before the game, Alabama elects its team captains after the season's over, before the playoff or before the bowl game. And then those are the guys who go out, for the coin flips and so forth, represent the team for the last games. For the national championship game, the four guys came out, but then Landon was the only one to go all the way and do the coin flip. You never see Nick Saban single out a player like that. That's how important and that's how special he was for Alabama this season.
Well, that's I mean, knowing the talents there, the only question becomes, how healthy is he? And an ACL isn't nearly as scary for a center as it is for a quick twitch skill guy, a wide receiver, or a cornerback like that. So
Right.
I love those kind of guys. Having just watched what Alex Mack did for the Atlanta Falcons for 4 years,
Yeah.
even towards the latter end of his career, just solidify that OL. He was a key piece. I give Thomas Dimitroff hell pretty much every single show I do for focusing too much on the skill positions, but that one he got spot on. That one was a great free agent signing. Now, before I let you get out of here, Alabama reloads. I mean, they don't rebuild, they reload.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 5 or 6 guys at least in the first round every year. Who am I watching next year? Who are the special guys that we can talk about being in the top 10 or so from the 2021 Alabama Crimson Tide?
Well, let's see here. They're going to have a whole new offense because they lost so many guys. But yeah, they'll be really good. The defense is going to be really good. So I'm going to start with Christian Harris at interior linebacker. He was actually better. He was Alabama's best interior linebacker. Will Anderson, I mean, he's got a couple years to go, but he's going to have a monster year as an edge rusher, and he's definitely someone to watch. If LeBron Ray can stay healthy on the defensive line, he could be a first-round pick next year. Wide receiver John Mechie III is going to be that guy who's going to really step up. And, with Bryce Young at quarterback, who is going into his sophomore year, it sounds like things are really beginning to click with Young. And so the offense, it's not going to be last year, but it's still going to be pretty dynamic. Just the defense, they're getting almost everyone back in key spots. So it's going to be interesting because the game is so geared, like we were talking about, to the offense, and to have so many guys coming back on defense. It's if Alabama gives up 10 points, a game, are people going to be sitting there going, "What's wrong with the defense?" When that would be the best defense in the nation, kind of thing.
So Bernardo on Facebook on YouTube has a question for you. So he didn't really watch Dickerson. Is he a good puller? The Giants really like to pull linemen, and there's probably incoming as their starting right guard. I'll tell you one thing is you don't play offensive line at Alabama unless you can move. You don't. So I want Chris to confirm this for me. But I'll tell you that if he was a tackle in one place and he was a center somewhere else, that tells me all I need to know about his mobility.
Yeah, he can move. He can pull. He can pull really well. Actually, this last year, I thought he was going to be the starting. I thought he was going to start at guard, just because I think he's got more potential at guard than he does at center. And look what happened. So, he can play. The great thing about him, he could literally play just about anywhere on the line. He's extremely versatile, and we all know. I mean, teams these days, you get a guy like Deonte Brown for Alabama. He was the starting left guard. He's huge. He can flatten guys. He can only play one position, and he's not even being talked about as a first round pick, and that's the biggest reason why.
And for a comp there, because we're talking about comparisons in this same draft, I think a guy that sounds to me that I've seen a lot of at Senior Bowl was Creed Humphrey at Oklahoma. During the course of Senior Bowl, he lined up at 3 positions and was solid at all of them, including center, tackle, and guard. So I will let you go. I know you're a busy man. You don't get out 3 books every couple of weeks and 50 stories a day and still have time to pick up all your Alabama sports writing awards without being a busy man. So I appreciate you coming in. Let me throw everybody up there again real quick. You can find Chris on Twitter at BamaCentral, and that's going to lead you to all his stuff on BamaCentral.com and all of the other types of things he does. So thank you, my friend. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was fun.
So that was Christopher Walsh, and Alabama's always got a ton of players. And frankly, I didn't keep him the whole time to talk about some of the other players at Alabama a little farther down the line. We didn't really get to Alex Leatherwood, Dylan Moses, Deonte Brown. So we're going to do this again with Christopher. I didn't want to keep him. He's got a young child, 3-year-old. So congratulations, Christopher, and a baby in the house. So you had to wait until everybody went to bed. But I appreciate y'all for joining and coming in and hitting in the comments. Make sure you hit that subscribe button or that follow button on Facebook if you haven't already. That's a big help. And if you want to talk some draft, we're talking a ton of quarterbacks tomorrow. We're on Broncos for Breakfast. Follow me at Twitter. I am not Christopher Walsh, now that I look down on there. I'm Scott Kennedy. You can find me at Scout Kennedy. And I'll link to it. But we're talking Broncos for Breakfast. We're doing mostly NFL draft talk. So it's not just Broncos. It's all the NFL draft, what the 49ers are doing at 3, the Falcons at 4, and how that affects the rest of the draft. We're talking a lot of quarterbacks and offensive linemen tomorrow. So tune in, follow me on Twitter, and we'll make sure you have a link and hit questions. Make sure you leave your comments and questions. I answer everything. I'm OCD about that type of stuff. So I appreciate you stopping by. Bernardo, thanks for joining in the chat. Alan, Sportsbook King, I see you on Facebook all the time. And we will talk again soon. Broncos for Breakfast at 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 Mountain, 7 Pacific. Too many time zones for me. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll make sure you get the link. Appreciate you being on here tonight.